What if the life you envy is quietly longing for yours? In a forgotten forest where the wind moved like prayer through the branches, a solitary crow sat on a twisted limb of an ancient fig tree. His feathers, dark as midnight rain, shimmered faintly under the setting sun. Yet no one looked at him with admiration. No one called him beautiful. The world passed by, indifferent dot above the rustle of leaves and distant rust-colored clouds. The crow's heart ached with a silent cry. A single tear traced down his beak, falling like a droplet of ink through the golden air. Below him, seated beneath the tree in serene stillness, was a monk. He had been there for hours, perhaps days, breathing gently with the rhythm of the earth. The crow's tear touched the monk's cheek, stirring him from his deep meditation. He opened his eyes, not startled, but gently awakened. He looked up, eyes soft with knowing, and asked, "Why do you weep, traveler of the skies?" The crow answered, voice trembling like wind in an empty nest. "No one loves me. They fear me, curse me, drive me away. I am nothing but a shadow in their world. I wish I could vanish." The monk breathed in the sorrow and replied, "You ache because you do not see your own wings. Tell me, little one, if you could become anything, what would you choose?" The crow paused. "A swan," he whispered. "Graceful, loved, pure." The monk nodded. "Then go, find the swan. Ask if he knows joy." And the crow flew, heart beating with fragile hope. The sky stretched wide and pale as the crow soared, the wind slipping beneath his wings like a forgotten song. For the first time in many seasons, he flew not to escape, but to search, not for food, nor for shelter, but for truth. In his chest, the monk's words echoed like a distant bell. Ask if he knows joy. He crossed valleys glazed in morning light, where lotus ponds bloomed in stillness. And there, beside a pool so still it mirrored the clouds, he saw the swan. She glided across the water like a thought barely spoken, white as snow, neck curved like the moon in its gentlest phase. The crow's breath caught. She looked untouched by sorrow. Descending slowly, he landed on a rock near the shore. "Great swan," he called, his voice laced with reverence. "Your beauty is like no other. People adore you, praise you, wish to be near you. You must be the happiest among birds." The swan turned her eyes toward him, eyes clear, but not bright. "I was once like you," she said, "believing beauty would bring me peace. But this white of mine, it hides nothing. It reveals everything. People admire me, yes, but I feel empty. The world is rich with colors, amber, emerald, crimson. Yet I possess none. I am plain. I often wonder what it would be like to wear the world's colors, even just once." The crow listened in silence. The image of a parrot bloomed suddenly in his mind, carrying the swan's quiet sadness in his feathers. The crow took flight once more. The sky had darkened slightly, tinged with the colors of dusk, as though the heavens themselves were echoing the longing he now bore. So beauty was not the answer. He flew on, chasing a new question. He remembered the swan's words of color, of longing for richness, and his thoughts turned to the parrot. Yes, the parrot. A bird painted by the hand of nature herself. Green like deep jungles, red like setting suns, yellow like ripe fruit. Surely such a creature must know happiness. Surely such color must mean joy. The crow traveled far until he found the parrot perched on a mango tree, gently preening its radiant feathers beneath the afternoon sun. With cautious hope, he approached. "Parrot," said the crow, voice humbler, "now you are a living rainbow. People smile when they see you. You must feel deeply loved. Tell me, are you happy?" The parrot tilted its head, then gave a soft sigh. "Once, I believed I was," the parrot replied. "But my colors draw hands, and those hands bring cages. I have spent more days behind bars than beneath the sky. My voice is admired, but only when it echoes human words. I sing their joy, never my own. I dream of the open winds of branches untouched. A silence passed between them. The crow's wings drooped. He looked past the parrot and imagined someone even more admired, majestic, resplendent. The peacock. The thought of the peacock shimmered in the crow's mind like moonlight on water, vivid, elegant, larger than life. If the parrot longed for freedom, perhaps the peacock had found glory in stillness. Perhaps those radiant feathers brought not only admiration, but meaning. And so the crow flew once more, across low hills and through warm breezes thick with the scent of flowering trees. Eventually, he reached a place surrounded by fences and stone, an old zoo, nestled at the edge of the city, where nature was both caged and displayed. There, within an iron enclosure under the open sky, stood the peacock. He moved slowly, deliberately, each feather catching the golden light and scattering it like sacred fire. Children pressed against the fence, their eyes wide with wonder. Cameras clicked. Laughter echoed like wind chimes through the metal bars. Yet beneath the dazzling display, something in his stillness seemed weighted with sorrow. The crowd thinned. Dusk approached. Cautiously, the crow stepped closer and spoke. "You are the most admired of all. People travel far just to gaze at you. You must be the happiest bird in the world." The peacock raised his eyes, heavy with age and knowing. "I was once proud," he said, voice soft as dusk. "But pride has become my prison, my beauty, my burden. They pluck my feathers to adorn themselves. I am praised, but I belong to no one, not even myself." The crow looked into his eyes. "In all your glory," he asked, "do you feel free?" The peacock closed his eyes, as if remembering a time when his wings still touched the sky. "No," he finally said. "I am not free. I am adored, yet confined. My beauty brought admiration, but also chains. They love the idea of me, not the soul within me." The crow stood in silence, the answer colder than he had hoped. With each flight, each conversation, the promise of happiness seemed to dissolve like fog in morning sun. The ones he envied were longing for what he already had: the sky, the wind, the forgotten corners of the world where no one watched, where no one judged. He thanked the peacock and turned toward the open horizon. The sky, though fading into night, still belonged to him. As he flew, his wings felt heavier, but his heart, somehow, lighter. He thought of the monk waiting beneath the fig tree, that stillness, that quiet presence. Perhaps that was the only true freedom, returning to the forest. The crow landed gently on the same twisted branch. The monk sat as before, eyes closed, untouched by time. When he sensed the crow's presence, he looked up with a gentle smile. "Did you find your answer?" he asked. The crow nodded. "I met the swan, the parrot, the peacock. All of them carried burdens beneath their beauty. None were happy. All longed for something else, and yet none of them were crows." "And you?" the monk asked. "What do you long for now?" The crow looked at his wings. "Nothing," he whispered. For the first time, the crow looked at himself without shame. His feathers, though dark, carried the winds of endless skies. His voice, though coarse, had echoed truths from every corner of the world. He had known hunger, yes. He had known rejection. But he had also known freedom, real, wild, untamed freedom. The monk, still seated like a mountain in meditation, observed him with quiet reverence. "Many spend lifetimes chasing another's light," he said, never realizing that their own glow was waiting patiently within. The crow tilted his head. "Why do we all want to be someone else?" The monk smiled softly. "Because we believe happiness lives in another form, in another color, in another name. But happiness is not found by changing the shape of your wings. Is found by learning to rest in them." The forest around them had fallen into silence, as if listening. "In the beginning," the monk continued, "you thought you were cursed. But tell me, who placed that curse upon you?" The crow thought for a moment, then said, "I did." "Then," said the monk, "perhaps it was never real." The crow closed his eyes. He breathed in the cool night air, filled not with answers, but with understanding. His suffering had not come from the world. It had come from the mirror he held up to it. And now, in this stillness, he lowered the mirror. The monk said nothing more. He didn't need to. The crow was finally home. The moon began to rise, its pale light filtering through the branches like silver threads woven by silence itself. The crow sat motionless, wrapped in the stillness between stars and leaves, between what had been and what was now becoming. He did not speak. He did not move. He simply breathed. The monk, ever gentle in his presence, picked up a single fallen leaf and studied its veins, as if reading a sutra written by nature. "Do you see," he said softly, "how all things contain their own path?" The crow nodded. He was beginning to see not with his eyes, but with the space behind them, the quiet knowing that rises when longing fades. "So much of your sorrow," the monk continued, "was born from comparison. But comparison is a thief. It steals not only peace, but identity. It makes you forget who you are by making you wish to be everything else." The crow looked down at his wings. They had taken him through storms, across mountains, over oceans. Not once had they asked to be brighter, longer, or more adored. They had only asked to fly. "Freedom," the monk said, "is not something given to you. It is remembered. The cage is not always built by others. Sometimes it's built within." The crow took a deep breath. "I am not beautiful," he whispered. The monk smiled. "You are not meant to be beautiful. You are meant to be real." And in that truth, a quiet joy bloomed. The night deepened, but it brought no fear. Only a soft hush blanketed the forest, as though even the stars were listening. The monk remained in stillness, yet his silence spoke more clearly than any scripture. Crow shifted his gaze upward. The sky was vast, no bars, no cages, no expectations. Just endless openness. How strange, he thought, that I had forgotten it was mine all along. He turned toward the monk. "Why do we forget what belongs to us?" The monk brushed his fingers over the moss-covered root beneath him. "Because the world teaches us to look outward before we've learned to look within. We chase reflections, not realizing they come from our own light." The crow lowered his eyes. "And what if our light is small?" "No light is ever small," the monk said. "Only hidden." A breeze stirred the leaves overhead. The fig tree, ancient and quiet, stood like a witness to their exchange. The crow listened, not just to the monk, but to everything: the whispering leaves, the rustle of night creatures, the slow exhale of the earth itself. He understood now that he was not lacking. He was simply not looking. All his life, he had feared being invisible. But now, he felt held by something larger than sight, a stillness that saw him even in the dark. The monk looked up, his eyes gentle. "When you stop wishing to be someone else," he said, "you meet the one you've always been." And the crow remained silent. Dawn began to stretch across the horizon, painting the sky with colors the crow had never envied: soft gold, trembling rose, a quiet blue that asked nothing of him. It was the first morning he had greeted without longing to be elsewhere. The monk stood slowly, his movements as fluid as water poured from an unseen jug. He looked at the crow, now perched without burden, and said, "There is one more thing you must understand." The crow tilted his head, waiting. "All creatures suffer." The monk continued, "Not because of what they are, but because they believe they are not enough. The swan feels too plain, the parrot too trapped, the peacock too displayed, and you, little one, believed you were unloved." The crow nodded, feeling the truth of those words ripple through his feathers. "But suffering," the monk said, "is not a punishment. It is an invitation, a teacher, a mirror. The crow let the words settle inside him. For so long, he had treated pain as a curse. But now, it felt like a doorway. Then my sorrow, he whispered, was a path? The monk smiled. One you had to walk alone until you were ready to return. The fig leaves rustled in affirmation. High above, a flock of birds crossed the sky. The crow watched them, not with envy, but with kinship. He no longer needed to follow. He had already arrived. He stretched his wings not to flee, but to feel the wind once more. He monk stepped away from the tree and walked toward a small clearing where the first light kissed the earth. The crow followed, gliding from branch to branch, no longer hiding in the shadows of his own doubt. They stood together, one with feet rooted in soil, the other with wings meant for sky. There is a harmony, the monk said, between being grounded and being free. Most believe they must choose, but the wise learn to carry both. The crow looked at him curiously. How can wings carry stillness? The monk pointed toward the rising sun, by no longer fleeing. When your flight is no longer escape, it becomes presence. A silence fell between them, not empty, but sacred. The crow thought of his journey, the monk, the swan, the parrot, the peacock, all of them searching, all of them aching. Yet in that ache, he had found something unspoken, a truth not taught, but lived. He turned toward the monk, his voice steady. And what now? The monk smiled, eyes gleaming like morning dew. Now you live as you are, fully, quietly, freely. They stood together, watching as the sun fully emerged, bathing the forest in warmth. There was no applause, no celebration, just the quiet majesty of what is. The crow's wings stretched wide, not to prove, not to escape, but simply to greet the morning. Above them, clouds moved slowly. The world did not change, but the way he saw it had. And that changed everything. Gator. That day, the crow perched on a high branch overlooking a valley he had once flown past without noticing. Now he studied every fold of the earth below, rivers winding like veins through green, trees rising like breath from the soil, small villages cradled in silence. He had seen this world before, but never with such stillness. A breeze stirred his feathers. It did not carry him. It simply moved through him, like a memory. He thought of all the birds he had met, each one locked in their own longing, each one dreaming of another self. And he wondered how many more flew through the sky, burdened by invisible cages made of thought. A squirrel rustled below. The crow didn't startle. He simply watched. There was no urgency in him now, no ache to become, no hunger to change his form. The monk's words echoed softly in his chest. When you no longer wish to be anyone else, your soul returns to its natural shape. That shape, he now knew, was never meant to be perfect, only true. He let out a single caw, not loud, not proud, but full. It rippled across the valley like a gentle drum, not to call attention, but to mark presence. And for the first time, he felt himself not as a mistake to be corrected, but as a note in a vast song, essential, honest, enough. He remained there, unmoving, as light faded and stars prepared to return. And the sky, as always, waited for him. Night returned like a soft blanket, wrapping the forest in silver shadows and distant whispers. The crow did not return to his old restlessness. He remained still, not from fatigue, but from fullness. Above him, constellations began to bloom, ancient stories etched in starlight. Once, he would have wished to trade his feathers for their glow. Now he simply watched them, recognizing himself as part of the same vast mystery. In the dark, the trees spoke differently, not with rustling, but with presence. The silence between their limbs felt alive, like breath without form. The monk had long since disappeared into the folds of the forest, his lesson complete. He had not said goodbye. He did not need to. The crow understood that some teachers appear only to guide us back to ourselves, and once the path is seen, they vanish into it. A small owl called from the distance. The crow listened. He did not answer. Not all silence is absence. Sometimes silence is reverence. He tucked his wings and closed his eyes, not in sadness, not in fear, but in peace. The kind of peace that comes not from changing the world, but from ceasing to fight with it. In that quiet surrender, the wind cradled him gently like an old friend, and though his body rested, his spirit soared not toward something new, but back into the heart of what had always been. Freedom was not a place. It was the moment he stopped searching for it. At the break of dawn, dew kissed the leaves like blessings from the unseen. The forest stirred once more, not with noise, but with a sacred awakening. The crow opened his eyes slowly, as if waking not just from sleep, but from illusion. He took a deep breath, and it filled more than his lungs. It filled the space he once called emptiness. In stillness, he remembered the monk's presence, not as a figure, but as a mirror. The monk had not changed him. He had only reflected what was already whole. That was the true teaching, not transformation, but recognition. The crow spread his wings, not to fly, but to feel. Each feather, each tendon, each scar, they were not signs of failure. They were his story, written in wind and sky. He stepped to the edge of the branch. Below him, the world stretched wide and wild, just as it had always been. But something had shifted. Not in the world in him. A question rose within him, quiet and strong. What if being enough was never about becoming more, but remembering less? He gazed once more toward the horizon, not with hunger, but with gratitude. Every bird he had visited had offered him a piece of the puzzle. Not of who he should become, but of why he never needed to. He crouched low, felt the wind, and lifted off. Not to escape, not to search, but simply because he could, and the sky, ever open, received him like home. His wings cut through the morning. Mist like brushstrokes on a canvas yet unfinished. He flew low, just above the trees, weaving through beams of sunlight that pierced the canopy like golden threads unraveling from heaven. Each gust of wind, each shift of current felt sacred now. No longer did he fly to compare, to chase, or to wish himself away. He flew to remember, to feel the air as it met him, not as an escape, but as an embrace. Below, he noticed a group of crows gathered on a ledge, their feathers glinting faintly in the rising light. Once, he might have looked at them with resentment, or worse, indifference. But now he saw them as kin shadows of himself from before the awakening. He circled once, then descended with quiet grace. They looked up wary. He approached without pride, without shame. One of them stepped forward. "Where have you been?" the bird asked. "You look different." The crow smiled inwardly. "I've been everywhere," he replied, "and nowhere." A silence passed. Yet it was not awkward. It was open. Another asked, "Did you find what you were looking for?" He tilted his head toward the sky. "I didn't find anything. I let go of what I didn't need." That made room for what was always here. They didn't fully understand, but they didn't need to. He wasn't here to teach them. He was here to be with them. And for the first time, that was enough. He folded his wings and stayed. The days passed like gentle ripples across a still lake. The crow no longer counted them. He lived them. He rose with the sun, rested with the moon, and let the wind decide his direction. Some mornings he flew alone, gliding over rivers and valleys without purpose. Other times he perched beside his kin, listening not to their words, but to the unspoken rhythm of being. He no longer needed to be seen. He no longer feared being invisible. One afternoon, as the sky glowed amber with the breath of evening, a younger crow sat beside him on a crooked branch. His eyes were restless, wings twitching. "I heard," the young one said. "You went far. You spoke to a swan, a parrot, even a peacock." The older crow nodded, but said nothing. The younger crow continued, "I don't like being a crow. Number one does. We're always pushed away, feared, forgotten. I want to be something more." The older crow turned his gaze to the horizon, where the mountains softened into mist. "I once believed that too." The young crow leaned closer. "And now?" The answer came slowly, like dusk settling on the forest. "Now," he said, "I am no longer trying to be more. I am learning how to be fully." The young one didn't speak, but something softened in his posture. Sometimes, a story doesn't need to be told. Sometimes, it only needs to be lived in silence beside another soul. And the silence held them both. That night, the forest whispered secrets only those who listen with the heart can hear. Crickets sang ancient rhythms, and the wind moved through the trees like a memory half remembered. The older crow sat beneath the stars, not seeking, not hiding, just being. He watched the younger ones, restless, full of dreams they had not yet questioned. He did not interrupt their flight. He understood now that every soul must wander its own illusion before it can rest in truth. In the stillness, he remembered the monk. Not his words, but his silence, the way he sat beneath the fig tree, unmoving, as if rooted to something deeper than earth. A man who offered no answers, only mirrors. The crow closed his eyes and saw that tree again. He felt the weight of his old sorrow like an old garment folded and left behind. He no longer wore it. Small beetle crawled across the branch near him. He watched its slow, determined steps. Not as something lesser, not as something separate, but as another traveler walking a path different, yet the same. Everything had become a teaching. The river was a teacher, the sky, a teacher, even the ache. He once carried teacher. And with that thought, he bowed his head not in defeat, but in reverence to be alive, to be aware, to be enough. This was grace. And he understood now, wisdom does not always arrive with answers. Sometimes it comes when the questions dissolve. As the days turned to seasons, the crow aged like a tree quietly from within. His feathers grew duller, but his eyes became clearer, as if the sky itself had settled inside them. He no longer sought high branches or distant skies. He remained close to the forest that had once held his sorrow, now holding his peace. Other birds came and went. Some stayed to speak. Others only passed through. He listened to them all, not with judgment, but with presence. One evening, a young sparrow fluttered down beside him, shivering from the cold. "Why do I feel so small?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The world is so loud. I can't keep up." The crow turned to her with eyes as soft as dusk. "Because you're still listening to voices that are not your own." The sparrow blinked. "Where do I find mine?" He looked up toward the vastness above them, in silence, in stillness, in the spaces where no one is telling you what you should be. The sparrow tucked her wings and breathed slowly. She didn't respond, but she didn't fly away either. That was enough. He had learned that not all guidance required words. Sometimes the most powerful presence was one that simply refused to rush. And as they sat together, the crow thought back to his younger self, tired, aching, longing to become anything but what he was. Now he knew. He had never been lacking. He had only been waiting to awaken to the truth of his own being. The forest changed, as all things do. Leaves browned and fell like soft sighs. Streams slowed, birds migrated, and quiet replaced the songs of summer. Yet the crow remained, not as one left behind, but as one who had learned to stay. In the stillness of late autumn, his solitude deepened into something sacred. Not loneliness, but communion with the essence beneath all change. One afternoon, a traveler passed through a human, draped in worn robes, eyes heavy with seeking. He paused near the crow's perch, gazing upward. "You sit so still." Man whispered, "You do not flee. Are you not afraid of me?" The crow tilted his head, unmoved. "I've flown far," the man continued. and still I have not found peace. Not in cities, nor in mountains. Every place promises something, but leaves me empty. The crow remained silent at the man's side. Tell me, wise one, what should I do? The wind passed gently through the trees, and then the crow blinked. Once, slowly, and returned his gaze to the horizon. The man followed his eyes. There nothing waited, just sky. Just distance. Just the present. Tears welled in the man's eyes. He bowed deeply, not to a crow, but to the moment. Sometimes, the clearest answers do not speak. They point. And sometimes the most awakened teacher has no temple, no book, no name only. Presence. The man walked away lighter. And the crow stayed. Wings tucked, heart wide, watching the world as it was enough. Asterisk, the seasons turned once more, as they always do. Snow whispered across the forest floor, covering old footprints, softening every edge. The world hushed beneath winter's breath, and the crow perched high, unmoving, like a shadow carved in stillness. He no longer felt the cold as something to resist. It touched him, yes, but it did not enter him. Inside, he was warm with understanding. Other birds had flown elsewhere. Some sought warmth. Others followed the instinct of migration. But the crow remained, rooted not by need, but by choice. Evening, as the sky blushed with the last light of day, he looked back across his journey, not with pride or regret, but with tenderness. Every sorrow had been a teacher. Every envy, a reflection. Every longing, a map. And in letting go of each, he had uncovered something deeper than joy. Contentment. Not loud, not fleeting, but steady. He thought again of the monk under the fig tree, of the swan's quiet sadness, the parrot's golden cage, the peacock's burden of beauty. All of them still lived within him, not as wounds, but as windows. He now understood what the monk had truly offered. Not transformation, but remembrance. To be what you are, fully and without apology, is to return home without ever leaving. Snow thickened. The branches bowed under its weight. And the crow, dark against the white, did not move, not because he couldn't, but because in that moment, there was nowhere else to be. Asterisk, when the sky cleared after many quiet days, a soft light spilled through the branches like grace returning to the earth. The crow opened his wings not to leave, but to stretch, to feel, to remember the gift of breath and bone. He had not found perfection. He had found presence. And that was more than enough. Now, he did not ask life to give him more. He asked only to meet life as it was, one moment at a time, with eyes open and wings still. If you too have wandered through longing, if you have compared your voice to others, envied their colors, doubted your path, know this: the journey is not to become another. The journey is to return to yourself. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply being called back to your own quiet truth. So sit. Breathe. Let go of what was never yours to carry. In the hush between thoughts, in the pause between steps, in the stillness between heartbeats, there is a path. It leads not outward, but inward. Walk it daily. Walk it gently. And when you find even a single moment of peace, stay there. That is your teacher. If this story touched something in you, let it live. Share it with another soul. Speak it softly. Or say nothing at all, just carry it like a feather in your chest, and return, again and again, to the temple of now. To the freedom of being.